G'day and welcome to another edition of Hef's Homebrew. Today I'm reviewing a product from Morgan's. It's their Royal Oak Amber Ale kit. It's been in the bottle now for about 4 weeks, so in a moment we will pour out a sample, have a little taste, see how it's going. I'll just quickly run through the recipe and the brewing process that I used. So started obviously with a tin of Morgan's Royal Oak Amber Ale. I used the 1.5 kilogram tin of Morgan's Caramalt, their master malt, a kilogram of my local homebrew shop's version of Brew Enhancer 3, so 500 grams light dry malt, and then 250 grams each of maltodextrin and dextrose. I did a cold steep with 300 grams of medium crystal. I did a hop steep with 17 grams of Sabro and 10 grams of Mosaic. I topped up to 23 litres with spring water. There was a dry hop where I used 20 grams of Sabro, and it was fermented with 2 packets, 22 grams of US 05, which was pitched dry. It was a 9-day ferment in total, started at 18 degrees, and after 4 days slowly bumped it up to 21, followed by a 4-day cold crash. Started at 1060, finished at 1016, so in the bottle, of which I got 25 long necks and 2 stubbies. So 2 carb drops in the long necks, 1 in the stubbies. Final ABV looking at about 6.3%. It was then conditioned for 15 days at 18, and then I've just had it stored in the fridge at 14 degrees. So let's crack it open. I'm just going to pour off a small sample. So it's a non-beer glass, but it's not exactly beer o'clock at the moment. So you know what I mean. Crack it open. And here we go. Alright, I'll just pop the lid back on. So I'm calling this Five Islands Amber Ale. It's a nod to 2 of my local breweries and their amber ales. So the Flame Tree Amber Ale from Resin in Bulli, and the other one is from 5 Barrel in Wollongong. It used to be called a Hoppy Amber, but now they call it their Navigator and call it a red IPA. So as you can see, with the non-beer glass, not clean to my usual standards, so plenty of bubbles clinging to the side there, but it is a dark colour. It is dark. It's quite clear. Hard to see with the dirty glass, unfortunately. But look, obviously darker on the camera. There are some nice kind of reddish ruby hues coming through, but I'd have to describe it as very dark amber, almost light brown. The head isn't bad, especially when poured into a nucleated glass, which I would normally do. Aroma. Okay, reasonably hoppy in the aroma. Those fruity aromas coming through, and also some nice deep caramel notes from the malt. All right, let's give it a taste. Cheers. What I've noticed with this beer, and it's probably one of my first brews that's really done this, poured off a sample from the fermenter on bottling day, as you do, and it was really hoppy. It surprised me how hoppy it was. And then, not in terms of bitterness, but in terms of those flavours from the hops, from the Sabro and the Mosaic. And then had a sample at 2 weeks, and I could barely detect the hops at all after 2 weeks. It was all malt. and then had another sample at 3 weeks, a little bit more hop coming through, and now at 4 weeks, it's got even more coming through. So I'm not sure whether it's got anything to do with the bottles that I've sampled and where they came from in terms of the bottling process. I wouldn't think that'd make a huge difference after a cold crash, but maybe they were ones that are at the end are a bit more hoppy. I don't know, or if it's just the flavour developing with normal conditioning. It's got a really nice medium to full body. The carbonation is low again. You can see the head is providing some lacing, which is really nice, and the head formation and retention in this one is better than my Pacific Ale, which I did at the beginning of the year, if you saw that video. But the carbonation again is reasonably low, which is not necessarily a bad thing for an amber ale, but it's the second or third one that I've had do that. So if you've got any tips again with carbonation, I'd love to hear them. Is bulk priming going to be a better option? I've always steered away from that because to me it seemed like to do it properly you need to rack to a bottling bucket or a second fermenter, which seems a bit of a pain to me to wash and sanitize another fermenter, and then you've got oxidation issues as well. So I'm loath to do that. Can I do it in my primary after cold crashing and just be really careful? I don't know. Happy to hear suggestions, please. The bitterness is reasonably low, I would say. The malt characteristics, I'm assuming that the main flavours that I'm getting are coming from the crystal malt. There's a really, really nice malt character coming through. It reminds me of Anzac biscuits, so it's golden syrup, it's brown sugar, it's quite sweet. It leaves quite a sweet finish in your mouth and on your lips. But the hops are coming through as well. I've found with my homebrew that it's much harder to detect individual characteristics from the hop flavour. I'm just getting like a general fruity taste. What I was really hoping for from the Sabro was that I would get some vanilla coconut type flavours. One of the beers that I mentioned earlier, the Flame Tree Amber Ale from Resin Brewing, that uses Sabro and Mosaic along with Galaxy and Citra, but it's got a really nice vanilla coconut type flavour coming through from the Sabro, which I was hoping for in this beer. Not really getting it. Is it because I use too much of the crystal malt? Do I need to tone that back, or do I just need to use more of it? I don't know. If you've got any tips, again, happy to hear it. But I'm really enjoying the way that this one's drinking. There is that balance between the malt flavour and the fruity flavour coming through from the hops, which I quite like. I found with your general basic kit that if you just brew it just as the tin and one fermentable, whether that's your brew enhancer or kilo of dextrose or whatever you want to do, or light dry malt, I still find them just a little bit thin. So I guess you could try it with the tin and the caramalt and see what it's like, if it's for you. I guess I've added enough to it that it's difficult to know what the tin is actually like. But as I said, it's just not to my taste just to brew it that way. So there you go. That's the way it is. And this is the second consecutive brew that I've cold steeped grains with, and for me, for what is such a small cost, like for 300 grams of grain, it's literally a couple of dollars, literally. It's next to no extra effort, and it's a very small time addition to do a cold steep overnight and then boil it for 10 minutes the next day. And it kind of adds a little bit of authenticity, I reckon, to the brewing process, rather than just chucking a tin and some powder and water in your fermenter, stirring it up and saying, yeah, I brewed. I mean, I'm not knocking that. There's definitely a place for that. But for me, adding the grains adds a lot more character to your beer. It's definitely helped with the head as well. So moving forward, I can see myself doing it with every single beer that I'm going to do from now on. So overall, I'm really happy with the way that this one's turned out. I'm interested to see how it develops with further aging. Right now, at 4 weeks, as I said, it's pretty good. I think that I will definitely be brewing it again. It's a really nice, and I'm a bit of a seasonal drinker, so obviously we're in winter at the moment, so it's a nice beer during winter, but also, you know, early spring and autumn is your classic amber ale time, I reckon. Would I make any adjustments? Look, I'm pretty happy with as is. I would like to try to figure out a way to get more of that vanilla characteristic coming through from the Sabro hops. So I'm going to do a little bit more research there and see what I can figure out. Potentially could do with a touch less of the crystal malt, I reckon, potentially, but I'd have to think about that. As I said, I'm pretty happy with the way that it is. So yeah, that's it for my 5 Islands Amber Ale coming from the Morgan's Royal Oak Amber Ale kit. So what's next for Hef's beer, Hef's Homebrew, I should say. Obviously same channel as my beer reviews, and that's what the channel's called. But on the homebrew front, I've got a few ideas. If you've been watching for a while and you watch the homebrew videos, then you know that they don't come out very often. That's because I don't brew very often. We're at the end of July, and this amber ale is only the 3rd brew that I've done this year. Few reasons for that. Number one, I just don't actually drink that much beer, so it doesn't make sense for me to be continually brewing with only a short turnaround and stockpiling huge amounts of homebrew. The other reason is I don't particularly like drinking the same beer all the time. I like to drink different beers. I couldn't tell you the last time I actually bought. Actually, I can, but I very rarely buy a full case of beer. I frequently buy singles with the occasional 4 or 6 pack thrown in. And I like drinking commercial beers as well as homebrew. Where I live, I've got 5 or 6 really good breweries, all within less than 15-minute drive. So I like to support them and drink their beers as well. They're often putting out new ones that I like to try. So potentially looking at planning towards having some homebrew ready for Christmas. I've got 3 ideas, three brews that I'd like to get done before the end of the year, and that'll give me 6 for the year. I'm really interested in having a go at brewing a cider. Mrs. Hef likes a cider. She likes it to be reasonably dry, so I've been doing some research around brewing cider. If you've ever done a cider, I'm happy to hear about recipes or tips. There is a recipe on the Cooper's Homebrew site for a Pavlova Pale Ale, which I guess you'd call a milkshake IPA, which I'd really like to try. Comes from their, it's only a half batch, it's only a 12 litre batch. It's a tin of pale ale. It's got passion fruit pulp, it's got lactose. Sounds like something that's up my alley. And then I'd like to either have another go at my Pacific Ale, or the other one that I've seen recently is a recipe for Kingsley's Passion Fruit Cerveza, which comes from the Cooper's Mexican Cerveza kit with light dry malt, dextrose. There's a steep of carapils and Galaxy hops. Sounds really, really nice and also really easy. I think it'd be a great summer beer. So the cider, the Pavlova Pale Ale and the Kingsley's Passion Fruit Cerveza are what I'm thinking about doing next. Further off in the future, a dark lager would be great. I talked about in my last one, Hef's Old, about possibly brewing that one with Nova Lager yeast to make a dark lager. And also, as you can probably tell, I'm a big fan of dark beers, so I'd like to have another go at doing a milk stout at some point, potentially again with chocolate and coffee, as that's a commercial style that I really enjoy. So I think that's about it for this episode. If you've made it this far, I know it's been a long one. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you sometime soon watching Hef's Homebrews or Hef's Beer Reviews. Cheers.